He reaches, oh, that ball's out, that's live! Back the other way, Sam Hubbard! The Cincinnati Kid! Hubbard's got a convoy! Chased by Andrews! At the 30, the 20, he will score!
To the end zone, down the field, and it is deflected, and gone! Touchdown! A.J. Green!
Over goes back to throw, men are coming late, looks right down the middle, there's Eddie Brown, he has it at the 35 to the 30, he may go, 10-5, touchdown!
Now the Bengals Super Bowl chances rest on his right foot. The kick is up.
Yeah.
It is good.
Corey Dillon, he's gone. The knockout punch, you're looking at it. 65 yards.
And they're back to throw as the blitz is on. Goes long, intended for Collinsworth. He has it down to the 20, touchdown! And Chris Collinsworth.
Throwing the long ball. Deep down the field. Johnson's got it. Touchdown, Cincinnati.
Chase go. Oh my goodness, what a gear he just found. Chase for the touchdown. Wow, Chase is on the case.
It is no fluke. It is a fact. The Cincinnati Bengals are headed to Super Bowl 56. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap. Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Jermaine Pratt has the football.
Yeah.
Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam. How about that?
Season might be over, but we sure aren't done. Craig Sandlin, Jacob Tissett back again. Tuesday night, Chatterbox Bengals. We're here to break it down. Bengals fell to the Steelers on Sunday, 44-38, effectively ending their season, knocking them down to a 2% chance to make the playoffs. Unbettable on some sports books. A tough place to be in what was supposed to be the middle of the championship window for this team. So very, very upsetting to be in this situation, but couldn't be more happy to be joined by Craig as always. So welcome back. Glad to be back with you. Reed held it down for me on Sunday, but glad everything went well in that regard. Obviously not the game, but how have you been?
Reed couldn't go 2-0 for us, though, and that was the most important thing. We couldn't get 2-0 out of him, but hey, as Lap said, bam, 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 coffin nails. And the Pittsburgh Steelers absolutely put coffin nails on this season and kind of took away any last hope that may be. But I'm doing well. Seems like this holiday season is just busy for everybody.
Yeah.
It just feels like, scrambling to get stuff together. I'm sending you videos to include in the show 20 minutes before the show actually starts. So the real MVP right there, Jacob, getting my clips from an email 20 minutes ago. And
we're ready to rock and roll. Now, if this was week 1, maybe not, but unlike the Bengals, some of us get better as the season progresses. So, now here in week 13, we're moving. So we'll just dive right into those.
We might talk
plays.
about some regression this week.
Yeah, no, we definitely will. Oh, we definitely will. And we'll start with what I pulled in as a positive play to kick off our key plays segment, but Craig very quickly pointed out that it might not be a positive play. So I'll start with the positive, and then Craig can break down why it might not be. But on this play, like we've done for the last few weeks, the Bengals have fallen in just heartbreaking fashion, but Joe Burrow has been unbelievable. And in this play, you see it yet again. Burrow drops back close to the goal line here, deep in the red zone, uses his eyes perfectly to move the linebacker in the middle of the field. As you can see there, looking to the right, 50 goes right with him, looks back left, 50 goes back, and then fits it right in that window to Andre Yoshivas, who makes a good play in the back of the end zone, something that he's been able to do really his entire career. He's struggled to make it happen outside of the red zone, but a good end zone threat for the Bengals. But Craig, something not so good happening there on the left side.
Well, let's start with the positive. Joe Burrow is unbelievable. That throw is great. The pocket presence, being able to move the linebacker, like you said, great. The protection for the most part, great. But it just, one of the things, we're going to show a couple of videos here. My boy Orlando Brown is hurting, and we talked about this when he got hurt, Jacob. We talked about how this was a little bit of a unique injury and how we weren't really sure how this was going to work out. The research that I did said it was going to be anywhere from 6 weeks to several months before he was healthy. Obviously, he was week to week by the time that he got on the IR.
Yeah.
But, man, those legs do not look athletic at all. I think,
not at all.
With all due respect, Orlando Brown has earned our respect. And the fact that he was out there toughing it out, you could see on some of the plays the strength that man has to be able to keep D linemen at bay, despite his inability to move side to side and even dropping back, was really impressive. But I think what I said to you is that he looks less athletic than my father, and my father is 70-something years old and uses a walker to get around. So nonetheless, Orlando Brown looks like he's struggling. I'm very interested to see if they continue to push him out there. Knowing the situation at this point, it doesn't seem like it's worth putting him back out there if he's going to be able to give you 100%. So I don't know. Look, we're going to run into another play here that shows just the inathletic ability right now. I don't think this is supposed to be a knock on Orlando Brown, but at the end of the day, the positive here is that he tried to give it a go. From what I could tell, a majority of the time he did a good enough job, but man, he looked like he was in pain out there.
And that's exactly what we see here on this play. Just an outside handoff to Chase Brown, and Orlando Brown's pulling, and he just can't get there. He just physically can't get there. It's a shame to see such a dominant player battle these injuries, because to start this season, he was having one of the best years of his career. And as you see on that pull, Chase Brown almost beats him to the outside. It's incredibly frustrating to see, and this is one of those situations where you might have to start thinking about protecting a player from themselves, because I refuse to say Orlando Brown is washed or anything other than just injured, because when we saw at the beginning of the year when he was healthy, he was one of the best tackles in all of football in basically every single metric. So I think that there's a lot of overreactions on social media to Sunday's play, and especially these couple plays that we're going through here, and how bad it was for Orlando Brown. But I'm choosing to go fully injury here, and I'm going to believe that he has at least 2 or 3 more good years in him, and I think he's going to be that top-tier tackle that we expect him to be, and that he was when he was healthy at the beginning of this year. But I think a conversation about shutting him down and protecting him from himself is certainly one that's going to have to be brought up here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's really worth it at this point to put him back out there. I mean, look, his pass block grade on PFF was a 23.3. And we're talking about a guy who before his injury was consistently in the 70s and at times would touch the 80s on his pass blocking grades. Like, he was legitimately one of the best pass blocking tackles in the NFL. And to come back out here and put up a 26.6 overall offensive grade on PFF, I mean, you can look at the tape and you can see that he's hurting. And at this point, you've got this man locked up on a 4-year contract. Like, I just don't know that it's worth aggravating or putting him through something like that when you can just sit him down either for the rest of the year or even for a couple more weeks until he gets to a better place. But like, I think the challenge is that the lack of depth and the lack of athleticism across the offensive line has put Zach Taylor and Pollock in a position where they have to try and make something happen. And they did that by, benching Cordell Volson, putting Cody Ford in at the guard this weekend, and bring Orlando Brown back. And he gave you everything he had. At this point, I think you sit him down, you put Cody Ford back at the left tackle position, let Volson try to work some things out. Maybe you give Matt Lee a chance to do something at the guard position, or put Karras at guard if you really want to move on from Cordell Volson. But I just don't think it's good for the Bengals or for Orlando Brown to be out there when he's clearly in pain.
I couldn't agree more. And obviously you worry about Orlando. You know he wants to be out there. This guy had an Ironman streak, high school, college, and the pros until this year of not even missing practices. So this is a guy that doesn't miss time. And you know for this injury to be bothering him this much, you know it's eating him alive. And he just wanted to be out there. And for him to go out and, like you said, you have everything he had in a season on the line game against the rival. That's what you want out of your franchise left tackle. But now, with this season lost, the Bengals have to look forward, and there's no reason to gamble 2025 with your franchise left tackle. We know this offensive line already needs help next year. This interior is a mess, and already moving off of Volson, like you said, for Cody Ford at guard on Sunday, you have to think that they're looking at 2 new guards next year. So to have Orlando Brown potentially banged up to start the 2025 season is not something I even want to consider messing with. You got to get him healthy. If he's healthy and wants to play for the last couple weeks of the season after sitting down and making sure he's 110%, sure, that's fine by me. But there's absolutely no reason to put him on that field while he's this banged up. And I think that goes back to the Joe Burrow conversation about benching him to protect himself from injury that ripples through the 2025 season as well. Because if you're talking about pulling Orlando Brown, we've seen that O-line without him, and it's certainly not pretty. I mean, not that it was great on Sunday with him, but certainly a different product without him on the field, and that just goes back to the worry that 9 could potentially get hurt in the final few weeks of a lost season and compounded into more, which would just be an absolute worst-case scenario for the Bengals. But like you said, before he got hurt, Cody Ford in the 70s and 80s of a pass block grade. Yesterday or Sunday, he was in the 20s, and this is one of those plays that can tell you why right here. Nick Herbig off the edge, strip sack, fumble, touchdown. Orlando Brown barely even got hands on him. 2 fully outstretched arms basically tapped the nameplate to escort him past. Strip sack, fumble, touchdown, basically spelled the season.
Yep, and that was the end. I mean, you said it basically spelled the end of the season, and that's really what it was. And, you know, give credit to Herbig. I mean, really good speed rush on the outside there. And, you know, I know that some people in the national media wanted to blame Joe Burrow and for this loss and the interception and the 2 fumbles. But when you look at the film, like, what is he supposed to do on that? Like, obviously the rush gets there extremely quick. Yeah, exactly. He did what he's supposed to do. Just unfortunately right now, offensive line wasn't even able to hold up for 2 seconds. I think, you know, Next Gen Stats does a like fastest sack, and if I remember, that sack was like right at 2 seconds. And I mean, there's very little that Joe Burrow can do in that scenario where, you know, he's getting the ball out to his receiver pretty quickly, and it just has nowhere, can't even get it out quickly enough because Orlando Brown Jr. can't get more than two fingers on a guy. 2.3 seconds officially on that sack.
Just unbelievable. I mean, you're not giving him a chance. And you talked about the other turnovers as well. The interception, tipped by 2 players, tipped at the line, tipped by T. Higgins, and then eventually caught. And then the other fumble, Joe Burrow had just an unbelievable play to track down his backside. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have eyes in the back of my head, and I don't assume Joe Burrow does either. So I don't know how he was supposed to avoid that one either. And at some point, I do understand that we are 4-8, and it does seem like every week we have excuses for Joe Burrow for these losses or for these turnovers, but they keep being excusable. I don't know who to blame here. I mean, you see Shannon Sharp sitting on First Take saying you keep giving Burrow excuse after excuse. At some point, it has to be his fault. What if it's never his fault? Have we thought about that possibility? Because I know when there is 3 turnovers like that in a game, you're talking about the quarterback has to be at fault a little bit here in a 44-38 loss, turning the ball over 3 times. Go back and watch the plays. You're not supposed to be on ESPN if you're a box score watcher. You have to see what happened. And when you see the 3 turnovers on Sunday, you can clearly tell that it's not Joe Burrow's fault, as it's consistently not been this year. He's been unbelievable in their losses. It's been unheard of, the numbers he's putting up in their losses to lose these games. And some people still want to blame Joe Burrow? I just don't understand it. When the defense is making plays like the next 4 we're going to go through here, you want to blame Joe Burrow for these losses? I just don't get it. But this one, a terrible play by the defense. Moving over to that side of the ball, which has taken up this segment for the vast majority of the season. This one, a check down to the running back, something we saw plenty of on Sunday.
Just watch Myles Murphy on this play. So he starts by kind of rushing and going to pick up Jaylen Warren, and then just completely turns his back to the play and is nowhere near the play by the time he gets to Jaylen Warren, and he ends up picking up 29 yards.
Drops all the way to the 45.
This is a this is a kind of a consistent conversation that Jacob and I have had in this show, and many have had, but just part of it for me is that this young nucleus of this Bengals defense just very rarely feels like it's in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
And so when you're watching plays like this and you see, at least to my untrained eye, I'm watching this and I'm immediately sniffing out, okay, they're moving the pocket to the side. They're going to, move Russell out. Why then would Myles Murphy's reaction be, okay, I'm going to drop 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage? Right there, okay, let's go get the quarterback. Or, I don't know, there's Jaylen Warren sneaking out of the backfield.
Well, how's he supposed to see Jaylen Warren, Craig? His head's turned completely the opposite direction.
So I don't know. That was a play that I literally wrote down in the moment when it happened. I was like, where is Myles Murphy going on this play? And what is he expecting to do? Because it makes absolutely zero sense in my mind for him to be turning around and basically abandoning the play. And then obviously you get the famed missed tackles, as the Bengals have famously done all season long. Last I checked, officially 12 missed tackles in this game. I had seen some reports of up to 14, but either way, just too many missed tackles. Lou Anarumo talked about it early on in the year about how he hadn't seen so many missed tackles, and that just hasn't gotten better throughout the course of the season.
No, not one bit. And the one thing I did want to point out on this play, you basically covered it there, but the one thing I did want to point out on this play, just because Jermaine Pratt was so sure there were no missed tackles this weekend, there's one by Jermaine himself right there. So had his arms around the waist of Jaylen Warren, unable to bring him down. I don't know about you guys, but pretty clearly seems like a missed tackle to me. If you remember after the game, Jermaine Pratt said missed tackles, not a problem. So glad he didn't think so, but certainly been a problem this entire season for the Bengals. And with the season on the line on Sunday against the division rival, they play quite possibly their worst game of the entire season. The Steelers' offense is middle of the league at best, and Russell Wilson looked like Seattle Russell Wilson going to a Super Bowl, and Najee Harris looked like rookie Najee Harris. It was unbelievable what they were able to do, scoring 44 points. That's more points than they've scored since 2019. Unbelievable what the Bengals defense allowed the Steelers offense to do to them. I thought maybe this was the chance that the defense stepped up just because the offense was so poor in Pittsburgh, but not the case. And another example of why that happens right here, as Pratt Freiermuth at the bottom of your screen, I could make that throw. Standing right at the top of the 10, Josh Newton below the numbers at the 15, Geno Stone outside the numbers at the 5. You have Jermaine Pratt at the top of the 20. There's no one even close to Pratt Freiermuth. Russell Wilson makes the easiest throw he'll ever make, and Freiermuth scampers in for a touchdown. Just inexcusable defensive play, and I hate to bang on Josh Newton here because he's a rookie who shouldn't even really be starting if it wasn't for the injuries that happened, but they happen, and once you're in the game, you're in the game. You can't bite on that. You can't fall forward on the bottom of the screen here and bite on that little hook and leave it wide open like that. Just unbelievable blown coverage, and like Craig said earlier, these young players on this defense just never seem to be in the right spot.
Yeah, I think the key indicator most times when you're watching film, and this isn't always, but especially when you're in zone defenses, most of the time what you're going to see is symmetry across the middle of the field, right? So pause it there, and you can see how this is lining up, right? It looks symmetrical. You've got 4 across the 18-yard line. But then as it kind of continues, you can see Cam Taylor-Britt continues back into his zone, which is a little bit deeper. Fig Newton bites on that Pat Freiermuth, but then he doesn't recover the way he's supposed to be. He should be back within, the 10 to 15 yard line in that range. But instead what happens is he's bit on that stop route by Pat Freiermuth. And then what happens is Jordan Battle then has to crash on that out route by, I think that's Pickens. It might be Austin. I can't tell. But nonetheless, Jordan Battle bites, which opens up that big zone that should have never been there because he should have been ready to go. So even if, let's say, everybody is in their position and Pat Freiermuth is open in that rate, he's not scoring a touchdown on that play because Jordan Battle would be in position at the goal line closer to the middle of the field. But you can see him crash on that outside route, which, again, he's not going to get to that route at that point. I don't know why he's trying to crash it. It's an easy first down at that point. Just stay home. But what happens is Fig Newton bites on the route, doesn't recover in the amount of time that he should. And you can see Cam Taylor-Britt up at the top of the screen playing it the way he should have. And you see Fig Newton at the bottom of the screen not necessarily doing the same.
Just inexcusable, really. And it's the same thing that we've talked about with Cam Taylor-Britt this season, with Geno Stone this season, with Von Bell when he was starting this season, even with Jordan Battle in some plays this season. This secondary is consistently inconsistent, which is the hardest thing to figure out if you're a defensive coordinator or anyone else on this defense that's trying to play football. You don't know who's going to be in the right spot. I don't know how you can rely on anyone back there at this point, because at any given time, they could be in the pocket of the receiver, making a great play like we've seen from Josh Newton last week against the Chargers, or 2 weeks ago against the Chargers. And then there you see him biting on a stop route by the tight end in zone coverage. So inconsistent basically across the board that I've been a Lou Anarumo backer basically this entire season, blaming the talent on defense and not the coaching, and wanting to give these guys a new chance after infusing this roster with some more talent. But as it continues to happen and the improvements just never, ever come, and it seems to be regression across the board, even from week one, how bad this defense was to start the year, they're getting worse. I don't know how you can't start to blame the coaches, as much as I've tried not to, but this is clearly coaching on this one. Just a preposterous call on a 3rd and 9 from about midfield. Craig, a cover 0 on 3rd and 9.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 3 receivers wide, and all of them are man coverage, and the man coverage is 10 yards off the line of scrimmage on all of them. And you can see at the top of the screen again. I don't want to pick on the guy, but Fig Newton again sees that Russell Wilson's ready to throw before Van Jefferson ever gets through his route, assumes that means it's going to be either a stop route or an out route, and tries to bite it and get aggressive. And instead, what happens is Van Jefferson runs right by him and is into the end zone, or not in the end zone, but 43-yard pickup. So at the end of the day, yeah, absolutely frustrated with Fig Newton biting on that Russell Wilson throw. But more importantly, just what are we doing? 3rd and 9. 3rd and 9 from Pittsburgh's own 41-yard line. They have to get to the Cincinnati 49 in order to pick up the first down. And Lou Anarumo dials up a cover 0 all-out blitz. Makes 0 sense to me, and I know you're going to call it out here. Geno Stone doesn't even seem to know what he's supposed to do on the play.
How does he expect to get pressure on a blitz when you're running from one edge to the other at the snap of the ball? Does he think he runs a 3-second 40? He's in the middle of the logo when Russell Wilson snaps the ball. It's insane that he's trying to blitz here. The ball is in the air from the center, and Geno Stone is on the B in the middle of the field. He never even makes contact with the guard that he's blitzing on. It's just another example of just inept play on defense, people not having any idea what they're supposed to be doing. And you heard today, Lou Anarumo said that the Geno Stone will continue to start because he's given it 100%. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The one last thing I wanted to point out on this play, right at the bottom of your screen, our old friend George Pickens, number 14. As soon as that ball is caught, what does George do? Turn to the Bengals sideline, signals first down. Stay consistent, George. Always taunting. Love to see it. Love to see it. Only 30 yards and penalties on Sunday for George Pickens, so baby steps.
What I what I love to see in that play is how we're blitzing 8 and get 0 pressure
Right.
still.
Yeah.
Put that back up and show me that pocket that Russell Wilson just had to throw that ball. Now, granted, he gets the ball away quick. I don't want to take this away, but you have 8 guys going up against 6 blockers, and what is ADG doing? What is Geno Stone doing? I don't even know who that is next to ADG. I can't even tell. Maybe that's Pratt. Maybe
BJ Hill.
That's BJ Hill dropping back into coverage.
Sure
Perfect.
is.
Love that.
Sure is.
So I just do not understand what is going on in this play call, because not only are we not getting pressure, we're just literally mind-boggling watching this film sometimes, where I do not understand. You've got 2 guys in BJ Hill and Akeem Davis-Gaither who are dropping back into coverage, and yet again they're in the exact same zone together. They're not going anywhere. It just makes 0 sense to me. And again, whether it's a terrible play call, players that don't know what they're supposed to be doing on certain plays, where their zones are, we've played clip after clip after clip over the weeks of players who are sliding into other players' zones on zone defenses. And it just clearly, these players are not ready for the game. And whether that falls on preparation from the coaches, whether that falls on preparation from the players, whether that falls on the players just not being mentally ready in the moment, I don't know. And I don't care, because it continues to show up time and time again. And if you're not going to be able to play football, and you're not going to be able to stay in your zone, and you're not going to be able to do what you're supposed to do on any given play, then you shouldn't be playing. And I go back to the Marvin Lewis era. Do your job.
Yes.
Stop worrying about the other 10 people on the field and do your job. If these people have to continue to worry about what you're doing, it only opens up more opportunities for holes elsewhere. So we saw it on the play earlier with the Pat Freiermuth touchdown. Fig Newton doesn't do his job. Jordan Battle then overcompensates for him not doing his job. And as a result, Pat Freiermuth has a walk-in touchdown. It's over and over and over again. At the end of the day, this team, everybody, I know it's a team sport, but you got to do your job and focus on your individual responsibilities and stop worrying about what everybody else is doing.
Well, Craig, we didn't point it out when we had the play back up there, but I'll put it back up there now. If you liked hits such as BJ Hill dropping in coverage, you'll love this Pat Freiermuth touchdown where Jay Tufele is guarding Najee Harris right there in the middle of the field. If you like your starting nose guard dropping back in coverage, you'll love your practice squad nose guard dropping back in coverage. Man, the mad scientist was absolutely in the lab this weekend, going crazy. Speaking of in the lab, now this one I do not fault Lou Anarumo for, because I don't think he could have been screaming Justin Fields is going to run the ball any louder. The only 2 people in the stadium that didn't know Justin Fields was going to run the ball was the Bengals safety and corner. Jordan Battle flies to the middle of the field, and our dear friend Josh Newton crashes in as well. Justin Fields around the corner, quick slide in bounds after picking up the first down, and that's the game, Craig.
And Jermaine Pratt.
Yeah. And
Everybody. Jermaine
Pratt couldn't be running faster. Listen. That's the fastest he moved all game on Sunday.
Unreal. Everybody and their mom knew what was going to happen. My mom doesn't watch football, but she knew what was going to happen. Listen, it just time and time again, this defense isn't in position, and yet another situation. Where are they going?
Where are they going?
Where are they going?
It's a question we've asked far too many times with this Bengals defense this season. Where are they going? And that's the problem, is that every single week it's the same story. 4-8 now on the season for the Bengals in a year where Joe Burrow statistically couldn't really be playing much better. And the season's completely gone. And every single Tuesday, even the wins for the most part, we are sitting here breaking down the same thing in the key plays, talking about the same story back to back to back. It's not enough from the offense. The defense doesn't know what they're doing. Are we going to blame the coaches? Are we going to blame the players? Duke Tobin needs to draft better. Mike Brown's not committed to winning. It's the same story every week. At some point, the people in the building have to get sick of it, right? Because they have to be hearing this. Whether it's the players on defense, they should want to play better. The front office should want to have the coaches coach harder. The coaches should want to win some of these games. I'm not saying they're going out there and trying to lose by any means, but they're certainly not giving it their all. It doesn't seem like these are high-effort plays by everyone on the field at all times. I don't understand how you can be so content, seemingly, in this Bengals organization with running the same exact thing out there every single week. And I'm not just talking about the ownership in the front office. I'm talking about the coaching staff. Because I know the personnel's not great. I know the talent's not phenomenal. But man, to not improve at all year long and have the same issues now that you had in week 1 and week 2, that's inexcusable. Even the worst rosters should be improving marginally as the season progresses. That's what the coach's job is. And if you're not going to win and you're not going to develop players, then what is a coach good for? It's a shame that we keep having the same conversation every single week because this team should be better. We should be talking about the playoffs. We should be talking about the Super Bowl. There's 29 teams that would trade for Joe Burrow right now in the drop of a hat. And we're wasting the best quarterback season that we've seen in a while. Since Mahomes, 5,050.
I mean, you feel bad for Joe.
Right.
I mean, and we watched the press conferences after the game on Sunday, and you see some of the quotes and you see the frustration, and honestly, you feel a little bit of acceptance. Like, I don't know if that's the right word, but like Joe Burrow just feels like he has accepted the fact that this defense is terrible.
Yeah.
Jamar Chase said it after the game where, the question was, what's your mindset knowing that you have to score every time or whatever? And his response was, that's our expectation now. Like, you can't have a team who only a third of the game, you talk about the 3 phases, and only a third of them are performing at the level that you need them to. You just can't have it. I mean, you hear coaches talk all the time about how you need all 3 phases of the game to click in order to really win in the NFL. We've got one phase clicking. Now I'll give a shout out. We got the blocked field goal on Sunday. Yeah. So shout out to that.
I did ask the question in our group chat. I guess I'll ask you the same thing. Is that the first positive Joseph Ossai play of his career? Preseason sack on Tom Brady was awesome. And then outside of that, it's all the plays I remember of Joseph Ossai are alarmingly negative until that block. So good for him.
Yeah, I can't remember a whole lot of positive. That's for sure. That's funny. But shout out to Joseph Ossai. I mean, got his block. But look, it just I get frustrated. In early in the season, we got frustrated a lot about Zach Taylor, who didn't seem to be learning from his mistakes in terms of like play calls on third or fourth and short. Some of these other scenarios. But as we continue to go through the season and continue to evolve, like I'm just not feeling anything from the players and from this coaching staff that makes me think that as well. And so it just, I mean, I feel for Joe and I feel for Jamar and I feel for this offense as a whole, really, that they have to go through this, right? You put up 38 against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. You should expect to win that football game.
Yeah.
And
you should expect to win that football game by multiple scores.
Yeah, yeah. And to lose it going away like that, just really, really frustrating. And, I think one of the things that adds to it is certainly, like I was saying before, is that the offense feels like they have to be perfect. And really the difference in this game was the one play that the offense wasn't perfect, and that was the strip sack that we mentioned earlier. So, I don't know what to do about it. I think at this point you just have to be looking towards next year, and the question becomes, what's the fix? And we know that from a player perspective, the personnel perspective, that I think this is more than a 1-year project in order to get this team to where it can and should be.
Yeah.
But the schemes don't seem to be setting the team up for success either. And certainly the preparation doesn't seem to be setting the team up for success as they continually find themselves in the wrong position. So whether it's an overcomplicated defense that the guys just don't understand, or Lou's just doing a bad job of prepping them, or the position coaches are doing a bad job of prepping them. I don't know, but whether you agree with it or not, we talked about it at the beginning of the year. Heads are gonna have to roll.
Have to.
And you could have all the faith in the world in Lou Anarumo and in guys like Frank Pollock. But at the end of the day, someone has to be held accountable. And we talk about accountability, and we hear accountability in the locker room, and we hear from Zach Taylor about how he's accountable for all this. Well, let's see it, because you just went through a bye week where most teams in the NFL would make some level of change to try and make their season turn around. And your big change was Cody Ford starting at right guard.
Well, they did find a way to have their leading tackler get hurt during the bye week, so kudos to them for that. I mean,
I tell you what,
they're getting hurt on Friday walkthroughs against this defense, and then Logan Wilson somehow getting hurt during a bye week. They continue to blow my mind. So, I mean, I guess they deserve some credit for that. But, man, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's about as frustrating as it could come right now, because I think the main thing that Bengals fans are dwelling in right now and have been really for a few weeks is we can point to all the things that we know has to change in order to be good quicker. We just don't have the faith that this front office is going to do many things on that list. So we're knocking half of those things off the list, and we're trying to rebuild this team in our mind with one arm tied behind our back, because we know this front office isn't going to be fully committed to winning with maybe the best quarterback in football, which is the worst place to be as fans. And somehow here in Cincinnati, we got it twice. It's unbelievable what we have to go through in this city, but miraculously we're here again. And with, everything that's happened this season, week by week, nothing changing, no improvement by the young players, coaches have to go. Coaches absolutely have to go. Changes have to be made. Like you just said, heads have to roll. And I think the question is just how high will they go? And I really don't know. I think these next few weeks are more important than a lot of Bengals fans want to admit. And I know the playoffs are out of the picture. And look, I've been the one this whole time sitting here telling you guys we got a chance. But Craig can officially take his victory lap. I'm out. I'm not holding on to the 2.5% or whatever it is. So I'm officially out. But that doesn't mean that these last 6 weeks aren't massive for this Bengals organization. You heard Joe Burrow say it right at the end of this game. We're going to figure out who's with us in these next 6 weeks. And we're going to figure out what the cornerstones of this franchise are made of. And he wasn't just talking about the captains of this team, himself, Jamar, Trey Hendrickson, all the leaders or supposed leaders in this locker room. He's talking about the coaches, and he's talking about the front office and how they're going to respond to this failure of a season. And I think that's the first time that we've really heard a public indictment on this organization from Joe Burrow, and he's still kind of stepped around it a little bit. But I don't think you have to read too deep into it to say that he's calling out the coaching staff and the ownership of this team and saying we have to commit to turning this around, because this is not what I signed up for when I signed that 5-year contract. He didn't sign up for 4-8. He signed up to be competing for a Super Bowl. A lot of these guys that came to this team to compete for a Super Bowl. This was not the expectation for anyone, fans, coaches, players, no one. And to see him sit there in the post-game press conference and call that out and say change is needed, that's massive. Because I think that's the quickest step towards change in this organization, is to have the very few people the Brown family will listen to call them out. Joe Burrow's certainly one of those people. I've said for weeks now, the only way Zach Taylor's going to be fired this season is if Joe Burrow sits there at a post-game press conference and asks for it. I think it would happen the next day. But I don't think he's going to do that. And I think Zach Taylor's going to be the coach of this football team next year. I think the best case scenario for Bengals fans in terms of coaching staff turnover is Lou Anarumo and most of the defensive staff, Frank Pollock gone with the offensive line coach, and then maybe you get Zach Taylor to give up play calling? But you really want him to give up play calling in a year where you're the best offense you've ever been? I think we have Zach Taylor doing the same exact thing next year. And then we hope a coaching change on defense and a small infusion of talent is enough to at least get to league average. And then who knows what this team can be with average or below average defense.
I go back to what we talked about on Sunday, and that's just that this defense doesn't have to be great. It doesn't even have to be good. It just can't be the worst defense in the NFL history. Like, That's really what it comes down to. So let's play this game, Jacob. And I'm going to ask you, you kind of did a little bit of this morning on Off the Bench.
Yeah.
But we're going to go through the Bengals coaching staff, and you're going to
Okay.
tell me, will they be with the Bengals next year or will they not be?
All right.
And we'll start at the top, and we'll start with Zach Taylor. Will he be the Bengals head coach next year?
I still just don't think, unless they lose out. 7-10 or worse, he's out. Anything better than 7-10, Zach Taylor will be the Bengals head coach next year. I pretty firmly believe that.
Wait, you think if they finish worse than 7-10 this year, he's out?
Then he could be fired, yes.
Or next year?
No, this year. I think he could be fired if it implodes down the stretch. But I think if they win
They've
three
got
more
4
games,
wins. You think they're going to win
I think
3
they're going to
more?
win 3 more games. I think they're going to finish 7-10, which I think he stays.
So are you telling me that if they find a way to lose to the Browns that he's gone? Because you're essentially telling me that you think he should beat the Titans, the Cowboys, the Browns, or the Broncos, and the Steelers. So you've got those 5 games, and you're telling me 3.
Resting Steelers, so I have 4 for 3.
You're 4 for 2 then, because you're saying we're going to beat the Steelers because they're resting in the last week?
Right, and then I have to
Or
get 2 more wins in Cowboys, Titans, Browns to keep his job. That's basically my line for Zach Taylor.
I think he's safe no matter what. Interesting, though. I don't think his seat is hot.
Who would you want if he were to be
as a head coach?
Yeah. Just throw it out.
It's a really tough decision. Fun. No, I mean, I think let's do that at the end.
Okay.
Because I have a thread of names that we can talk through and see how you feel about it.
Sounds good.
All right, real quick. Offensive side of the game. I think this is going to be mostly they'll be back, but we'll see. Dan Pitcher
back.
Dan Pitcher's back. Tight ends coach James Casey back. Running backs coach Justin Hill back. Quarterbacks coach Brad Cragthorpe back. Pass game coordinator Justin Riscotti. All of those guys back. Wide receivers coach Troy Walters.
I would assume they're going to bring him back. I think that's the first one where you have a little bit of a question, but there's no way they fire him, right?
I find it really hard to believe that Jamar Chase is going to be on board with firing Troy Walters, but there is some question about his ability to develop, not elite talent like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but I don't think he's going anywhere. And then the obvious one is Frank Pollock, offensive line / run game coordinator. I don't think there's any world, no matter how good you are this last stretch, that Frank Pollock should be your offensive line coach next year.
I believe his contract is up as well, so it's not even a firing in the sense of you would have to go out of your way to extend him as your O-line coach. Certainly haven't seen enough in his tenure to warrant that. So, yes, certainly a new offensive line coach next year should be expected.
All right, so now let's get to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll start at the top. Lou Anarumo.
I have a hard time believing many of these guys are back at all. I mean, Lou certainly is gone. And I just think a defensive coordinator that you're going to bring in, if the Bengals are committed to winning, you're going to go get a defensive coordinator high enough on a totem pole that he's going to bring a lot of guys with him to fill his defensive staff. So it's not necessarily as much of an indictment on a lot of the lower line guys here, even though I think a lot of them are deservedly let go. I just think firing Lou Anarumo kind of spells change for the entire defensive staff.
Okay, so let's say if you were in charge, if you would want as the head coach, if you were Zach Taylor, would you want these guys back when you make that change? Linebackers coach James Betcher.
No. We've only seen regression out of Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt.
Secondaries coach Charles Burks.
Certainly not.
Gone. Defensive line Marion Hobby.
Defensive line has developed great over the years in Cincinnati. That is a joke. He is certainly gone.
And safeties coach Jordan Kovacs.
Oh, man. The only group worse than the defensive line is the safeties. So might as well get him out of here too.
So you're essentially saying the entire defensive coaching staff changes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, that's what I'm on board with. And because I don't think it's going to happen that they fire Taylor, nor do I necessarily think they should, I think that a complete overhaul of the defensive staff is the most all in they could possibly go coaching staff wise in terms of trying to turn this around. So yeah, I think basically a complete overhaul of the defensive staff. And look, if we bring someone in who wants to keep some of the guys we already have here, then maybe that's a conversation that you have with them when that time comes. But I think you would offer the defensive coordinators you are going to offer with the pitch that they have a clean slate and they can build their own staff.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And Willie Lutz on Twitter put together a little thread of potential replacement defensive coordinators. I don't want to get too in the depth on that, but some of the names just for people who are wondering, like, what is the direction this team could go if you do fire Lou Anarumo. Some of the names that were thrown out there: Durante Jones, who's the Minnesota Vikings passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach. Dennis Allen, the former Saints head coach, has a defensive background. Robert Livingston, who's currently at Colorado on Deion Sanders' staff, used to work for the Bengals. Kelvin Shepard, linebackers coach at Detroit. Brandon Staley, former 49ers head coach. Grady Brown, Steelers secondary coach. Dave Merritt, who's the Kansas City D-backs coach. Terrell Williams, another Lions coach. So those are the types of names that you could be looking at. Any of those stand out for you, Jacob, as someone that you'd be most interested in?
Look, if you're going to go get a defensive coordinator and try to turn this thing around right away, I'd go get one of the guys that has been a head coach, has been a defensive coordinator well enough that they got one of those gigs. And the two names you listed there, Dennis Allen and Brandon Staley, I would personally love Brandon Staley. And I know that name jumps off the page in a negative way to most people because of his terrible clock management as a head coach. But spoiler alert, as the defensive coordinator, you're not calling timeouts. So I think he's an incredibly creative defensive mind. I think he would be able to mask a lot of talent deficiencies, at least early in his tenure, as the Bengals are kind of undergoing this defensive rebuild. I would love Brandon Staley, but the other name that I would really enjoy here, and just kind of wiping Chicago out of my mind and going back to Indianapolis, Matt Eberflus was such a phenomenal defensive coordinator in Indianapolis that I would love to explore bringing him into Cincinnati and just what that might mean here. And even in Chicago, when they fired their defensive coordinator last year and Matt Eberflus took over calling defensive plays for the back half of that season, they jumped from 22nd to top 10 in total defense at the end of that season. An unbelievable jump with Eberflus at the helm in Chicago. I think he's a name, if he's willing to not take a year off and kind of quick turnaround, get right back into it, certainly explore that in Cincinnati as well. But I would love to attack one of those head coaching guys. And if you get a Staley, I'm not an Eberflus or a Dennis Allen, not interested in that. But if you get a Brandon Staley, turns this defense around, does good things, and Zach Taylor continues to trend the wrong direction, maybe you can look that way for an in-house promotion. I don't know, but certainly an opportunity with some of those younger guys as well, especially some of those guys on the Detroit staff, which I've had circled for a while, because if Taylor were to move on, Aaron Glenn is the name I would want taking over. So if he comes in, I would expect one of those Detroit guys to be his coordinator. So the D-line coach or linebackers coach from Detroit, both solid options as well.
Colin in the chat throws out Robert Saleh as well as an option.
He was incredible.
And then Sean Connor. Yep. And I don't know about Saleh. I think he probably still has his eyes on head coaching gigs.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones fell apart so drastically when you're talking about guys like Brandon Staley that I don't think that they would get a look at a head coaching job. I think Robert Saleh still has hopes to be a head coach in the NFL and could be a head coach as early as next year. Michael Rolfe with a $10 super chat. Bengals dreams may be dead, but the Chatterbox Sports dreams live on and prosper. This show is going to the moon this offseason. I can see the Santa twinkle in Craig and Jacob's eyes. We appreciate you, Michael, as always. You mentioned it there. You brought up Aaron Glenn as your choice for head coach. I really like that. A lot of people are enamored with the idea of Ben Johnson. I'm not opposed to that either. Look, I might be a little bit on the edge here. I'm really a fan of a head coach who is just a head coach. And I don't love coaches who have to be so focused on one side of the ball where they lose sight of the other side of the ball. And I feel like that's what's happened here in Cincinnati, is that Zach Taylor is so focused on the offense that he loses sight of the defense. And you see coaches all the time on the sidelines who are going over and addressing their units and talking to their teams. Zach Taylor doesn't have an opportunity to do that as the head coach because he's too busy coaching the offense when they're on the field. He can't do anything with the defense when they're not on the field. And so I would love to think through, is there an opportunity to bring in someone who can really just be a head coach and not be a play caller on the sideline? My problem is, Jacob, without knowing the philosophies of some of the names that would be on the list of where they fall, right? So obviously guys like Aaron Glenn are attractive in what they've done in Detroit with the Lions defense. Ben Johnson is obviously attractive in terms of what he's done with the offense. And I want them to be involved through the week in preparing those squads, but I don't necessarily know that I want them calling the plays on game day. So let's run through some of these other names that have been on the list, and we'll get some reaction to each of them. And I want to start with one that I have a pretty big reaction to, but want to get your reaction first. And that's everyone's favorite name to throw out right now, and that's Bill Belichick.
I don't want it. And I know that might not be a popular take, especially in our chat. They've been throwing his name out basically since we started this segment. I personally don't want Bill Belichick in Cincinnati. I think that's a small window solution at head coach. I don't think he's coaching for very long. I think obviously at his age, he has other priorities with, health. Obviously at some point he's going to have to step down. And I would like to get a younger guy in the building that can grow with this team and really mold them along. I don't think Bill Belichick's mode necessarily works in the NFL anymore. I don't think players want to buy into the Patriot way with $180 million in guaranteed money. I just don't think that philosophy necessarily translates to the modern day NFL. And is that a good thing? I don't know. Are the players soft because of it? Maybe. That's what everyone wants to say, and maybe they're right. But all I know is that the end of his time in New England, it certainly wasn't pretty. And he didn't do a great job developing draft picks. And I know if he comes in here as the head coach, he probably won't get control in the front office. But then why would he come? He wants control everywhere. I have a hard time imagining Bill Belichick's going to take a job outside of New England without the control that he had in New England. That's the kind of guy he is. He wants the control of the team. And I know that was talked about when he was interviewing for Atlanta last year, is that he said he would give up some of that control, and Arthur Blank and the Falcons still continued to go in other directions. So I think Bill Belichick's the greatest coach of all time, and certainly deserves his flowers, and he'll get in the Hall of Fame when his time is up. But I certainly don't want him coaching the Bengals next year.
Yeah, I am immediately out on Bill Belichick for a number of reasons. One is that whoever the head coach is, I need them to be on the same page with Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
And Bill Belichick obviously had a great relationship with Tom Brady, it seemed, but they don't even talk now. Yeah. Like, everybody talks from a professional standpoint. They managed fine and they won 7 Super Bowls together, but like literally it's twisting arms to get them to even acknowledge each other now. And the fall off that they had is just incredible. And whoever this head coach is that they would bring in to potentially replace Zach Taylor if they were to move on, better be Joe Burrow's head coach for the remainder of his career.
Exactly.
Like, at the end of the day, you are hiring your head coach through the end of Joe Burrow's career, and Bill Belichick at 72 years old is not that. And so for me personally, I am out on Bill Belichick. I don't think that he would give up the control, even though he's out there and said that he understands that a head coach GM combo is not the way of the NFL anymore. Doesn't mean that it's not what he wants. I'm not in love with that idea, even though I know a lot of people are. You look at what he did with Mac Jones. You look at what he's done with New England since Tom Brady left. And as much as I hate to say it, I think Tom Brady was much better for New England than Bill Belichick ever was. And I think he gets more credit than maybe he's due. But that's a bit of a hot take. So
that is.
The other one of the other big names, Mike Vrabel. We won't spend as much time on these moving forward, but just Mike Vrabel, to me, I don't know. His players seem to like him. I like the fact that he just focuses on being a head coach. He's not out there trying to call plays, not trying to be a defensive coordinator on the sidelines. But I just look at what he did with Tennessee, and I'm not blown away. And like, I don't know. I wouldn't be out on Mike Vrabel, but I'm not as excited about Mike Vrabel as many people are.
Mike Vrabel falls for me pretty close to the Bill Belichick wagon. I would be way more excited for Vrabel than I would be for a Belichick hire. It would certainly be exciting, and he did do a lot with Tennessee, got them to the 1 seed with Ryan Tannehill playing quarterback. Have to ask what he could do as a leader of this Bengals team. And I think Vrabel's a guy that you could point to as what you were asking for, the head coach only role. And you bring in a play caller on offense and defense and have him just lead kind of the culture of the program, or not the program, of the organization and of the locker room there. I think it would be an interesting hire, but I wouldn't necessarily want either of these guys. And it would be really hard for Mike Vrabel to be coaching the Bengals anyway, because he's going to be coaching the Buckeyes. So that'd be tough.
We're not going to get into that today. I know you've had your viral moments from off the bench, so we'll let that one be. Let's move into those Lions coordinators: Ben Johnson on the offensive side, Aaron Glenn on the defensive side.
Ben Johnson scares me. And would I be excited about a Ben Johnson hire? Absolutely. But what's he going to do? Call a better offense? All the issues we have with Zach Taylor, we don't know that Ben Johnson can do them better. If we fire Zach Taylor this season and go get a coach, that's why I lean Glenn in this situation, because I would want to go get a defensive guy. I trust Joe Burrow to take a lot of control of the offense. I like Dan Pitcher a lot of the offensive coordinator role, and I think that those two guys can really man that side of the football to a point where we can win a lot of football games if the defense gets figured out. So certainly out of those two, I would prefer Aaron Glenn, but I would be a lot happier with either of them, really, than the first two that you named.
Okay, interesting. Here's my struggle, is that I think the offense can be successful without an offensive-minded head coach. I've struggled to see the defense be successful without a defensive-minded head coach and a focus on the defense, right? I'm sure Zach obviously is focused on everything, but like, it feels like he's very focused on the offense, and as a result, I think the defense has struggled. Obviously, Lou hasn't helped things. I don't know. As much as I hate to say it, I'm really in love with the idea of a defensive-minded head coach as our next head coach. The fact that you have Joe Burrow, and it's mainly because I think Joe Burrow and this offense can be extremely successful without having to have that offensive-minded head coach, but I could be wrong. Let's move down the list to some other names, and Brucey just brought it up in the chat, but he was on my list, so we'll get to it now. And that's Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator in Kansas City.
I think I'd be most excited about this because you're hurting Kansas City, but we've seen Spags be a head coach before, and he's a hell of a defensive coordinator. And if he wants to come to Cincinnati and replace Lou Anarumo and call the defense, I'd be happy to have him, but not as a head coach.
Joe Brady, Bills offensive coordinator.
Let's just build 2019 LSU. Well, why not? Let's just do it. Like, bring him in. No, I don't want Joe Brady. And this is what I mean when we go through this list of head coaches. Are we sure we want to fire Zach Taylor? All those people calling for his head? Are you sure you want to fire Zach Taylor? You might get Joe Brady.
And if we're being honest, Joe Brady feels like the type of hire that the Bengals would make, where like they wouldn't have to pay him $12 million a year. They could bring him in as a first-time head coach, and probably wouldn't have to overpay him. Liam Cohen, Buccaneers offensive coordinator.
No, thank you. He failed with the Rams, went back to Kentucky, and now in Tampa. I mean, it's exciting. He's doing good stuff, but Dave Canales isn't exactly tearing it down in Carolina, and I'm not trying to rebuild here. So, no, thank you.
Cliff Kingsbury, Commanders offensive coordinator.
Now this one's a little bit more interesting. Out of the completely volatile coaching names that would be pretty objectively bad hires, Cliff Kingsbury is the one I would be the most excited about. I wouldn't want it, but I could talk myself into Cliff Kingsbury.
Okay. Could you talk yourself into Kellen Moore, the Eagles offensive coordinator?
Absolutely not. But I'd watch the Statue of Liberty a couple times, and I think I could maybe come around.
How about Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator?
Kind of goes in the same boat with me as Spags, but he's not as good at coordinating his own side of the ball. If he wanted to call our offense, sure, maybe I'd think about it, but not interested in him as a head coach. I'm sure a lot of people will be, though. So something to keep an eye on with the Ravens, potentially losing coordinators again.
Vance Joseph from Denver, the defensive side of the ball?
If you would have asked me this question prior to Monday Night Football, the answer probably would have been yes. But I'm going to have to take a couple days after Jerry Jeudy taking that defense behind the woodshed, as Troy Aikman said, before I'm back in on Vance Joseph.
Okay. We already talked about Steve Spagnuolo. Last name on the list, I think I know your answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How about Jesse Minter, Chargers defensive coordinator?
Oh, that would make me physically ill, but I would be very happy. I love Jesse Minter. I think he's one of the best young coaches in all of football. I would expect that he's a one and done as the Chargers defensive coordinator. I would imagine that he's going to at least get head coaching interviews. Maybe he goes the Ben Johnson route and sticks around with his buddy Harbaugh for a while and gets his feet wet in the league before moving on and taking the reins of an organization. But I would be very, very happy with Jesse Minter. Maybe that's not what you expected, but I think he's one of the best young coaches in football, and certainly I lean defensive when asking who should take over for Taylor. So I would love Jesse Minter. An interesting name being thrown out in the chat, Rex Ryan.
Get out of here. That's not an interesting name. Stop it. Get out of here.
They're asking.
All I know is that if Rex Ryan ever gets back as a head coach, we know that he's going to hire or he's going to sign Mac Hollins because he'll walk around without any shoes on.
That's true. No, you're right.
At least we know that much. No, pass on that. Okay, so we just went through it. Aaron Glenn's your pick. Is that where you landed after we go through all that?
It is.
Okay.
How about you? What's your pick? Just Zach Taylor?
Well, look, Zach Taylor's not going anywhere.
Right. I agree.
I think realistically he could finish the season 0-5 and he's not going anywhere. I think if you came to me in January and said, all right, Zach Taylor's officially fired, now you're put on the spot, right? I think I'd be leaning towards a guy like Jesse Minter. And I was actually a little surprised that you were on board with that. I knew that your initial reaction would be immediately wanting to throw up, but look, I think he's shown an incredible ability to turn around the Chargers defense immediately.
With not a huge change in personnel.
I think that he has been able to learn under a coach in Harbaugh that regardless of what he did off the field, he set a culture in LA already. He set a culture in Michigan. He obviously, has done extremely well. And Jesse Minter has been there for a long time with him. And so I don't know. I like that idea. And he's one that would definitely be towards the top of my list. I understand the infatuation with guys like Ben Johnson, and I love his creativity, watching him call a game and seeing some of the different things that he puts in. But for me personally, I'm going to lean defensive side of the ball. And for that, I think to avoid taking your answer of Aaron Glenn, I'm gonna go with Jesse Minter as my next Bengals head coach.
I'd be very happy with either of those. But as we said when we started the conversation, it's going to be Zach Taylor, so just prepare yourself. But defensive staff changes probably coming, and that's what the next steps are going to be for this organization as we progress to the offseason. You're going to have tough decisions with the coaching staff, but you're going to have tough decisions with the roster as well. There's a lot of guys that aren't playing very well that you can get a lot of money off your books with just a simple cut. We're talking about Sam Hubbard. We're talking about Geno Stone, Jermaine Pratt, Alex Kappa, Zach Moss. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of guys that the Bengals can move on from to get their cap space all the way up near $100 million. This could be a big offseason for the Bengals, and they could have the resources necessary to infuse this team with the talent to cut down this rebuild window from what I had originally said of 2 to 3. So if they hit on a few things here, maybe it is just 1 year in the draft class we've seen as rookies now really panning out. It could be much quicker than we expected if they attack this free agency well and don't hold on to dead weight and are willing to accept a little dead money instead. I think that's the biggest thing that we're going to be able to tell with this Bengals team right away is how they handle these contracts of the players that aren't cutting it right now. Do they kind of change the way they operate and eat the dead cap of the salaries and, save some money? Or do they hang on to these players until their salaries run out like they've done in the past and really handcuff themselves as they move forward with all the holes that we know they have to address? And I think at the end of the day, the main issue we all have is what a waste this season has been. I mean, Joe Burrow, 67% completion percentage, 3,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, 5 picks. Jamar Chase pacing the Triple Crown, 80 catches, 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns. No one else in double digits. Trey Hendrickson leading the league by half a sack. I have the betting odds on the bottom ticker coming across because there's no Super Bowl or playoffs to bet on anymore. And all of our guys are favored to lead in statistics. At least that's fun. This season's an absolute waste, getting the best of the best out of your best players, which is why it's so hard to swallow. But we'll be here the rest of the way to take you through it, talk you through the pain, get ready for the draft and the offseason and what we can do to make next year a whole lot better. Craig, anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Here's what I'll say. We talked about it earlier. Lou Anarumo's defense is ranked by total yards per game in the NFL, 2019, 29th, 2020, 26th. And then you had the 2-year AFC championship runs, 18th and 16th, respectively. Then in 2023, 31st, 2024, 27th. You literally just need a middle-of-the-road defense to win with Joe Burrow. It's attainable, and it's attainable short term. I know that long term, this is a huge project and there are a lot of positions that need to be addressed on both sides of the ball. This team can be a Super Bowl contender again next year. And like I said on Sunday, I'm sure come next July, I'm going to have my rose-colored glasses on, expecting this team to be right back in the mix.
Absolutely, and I'll be right there with you. I hung on a little bit longer than you did this year, but I'm with you now, and by the time next season kicks off, you'll be back with me. So it's full circle, right? That's how it all works here. But for Tuesday's Chatterbox Bengals, that's going to do it. Jacob Tissett, Craig Sandlin here as always, and we'll be here the rest of the year, but not on Thursday, because on Thursday, myself and Elliot Rearing will be at Champions Grill on Work Road on the west side of Cincinnati. So come out. Enjoy the live show before Thursday Night Football. It's always fun to see you guys. We appreciate everyone that tuned in tonight. Hooday, I guess. We still got a few weeks left. 2024 is over before any of us wanted it to be.